Well, thank you for joining me. Brand image, customer experience, customer engagement. Now, the schools go back. So I'd like to talk about the options of whether motivating our children really matters. So, obviously, my little goddaughter, she's going back to school. So I thought what I'd do is trying to come up with some motivational tips, motivational comments. So you do the simple, you do an online search for the word motivation. You'll be met with inspirational quotes, images of mountaintops and heroic acts. And there's no surprise that when we try to motivate our children and the students at school by talking about the likes of Bear Grylls or presidents or explorers, we're kind of hoping that it inspires them. But we're never going to inspire them to do homework assignments. Perhaps, unsurprisingly, nothing we do is working. So the thing being is, as a business coach and as a consultant, I started to look further underneath to understand what we were doing and why we were doing it. So I looked back and I did some research, and I'd like to quote it to you. A lot of the behaviour systems we're influenced is an outdated notion of behaviour. Now, back in the 1930s, Burrhus Frederick Skinner, commonly known as B.F. Skinner, conducted a wide range of experiments with a set of rats. When the clever rats worked out the connection between operating something and getting a reward, it was called operant conditioning. Now, it's a very simple response and one that we're still using. So back in the 1930s, he did this experiment. If you learn to do something, you get a reward. Well, hang on a minute, we're still doing that with our children. We're basically saying to them, do a task and we give you a treat. Now, there comes a point that the more you read about that experiments and subsequent experiments in the 1996, it became very much that we started to reward children with motivation. Now, the problem I have with that is that it's a reward scheme. And sooner or later, we're going to get to the fact that, do they want the reward? Does the reward outweigh the test or the behaviour? Now, by this, I'm asking you just to have a look. If you reward somebody for doing a task, when they get to do the task and it becomes monotonous and boring, you've got to keep upping the rewards. So the questions that people tend to internally ask is, can I do the task? Do I want to do the task and why? And what must I do to succeed in order to do the task? Now, there is the thing, and I'd love to see it played out, where you ask a group of children or a group of people to do a task. You reward some for doing that task and others you don't. Now, when the rewards finish, I'd like to know how many of them would still do the task if there was no rewards available. So I just want to bear that in mind as we sort of come up to, the going back to school. What motivates behaviour? What motivates results? So I kind of wonder whether we've got it all wrong. We hang the carrot out, we hang the stick out. If you behave yourself, you get a reward. If you don't behave yourself, you get a stick. Well, I think those days have long gone. And what I'd really like to understand is that what do we do and what do we consider to be motivation? Are we doing motivation for the right reasons and in the right way? Do we understand what our children want, what their desires are, what their needs are? Now, I know you're going to sit there and you're going to go, and it's easy for you. You're an athlete. You like your sports. You come from a sporting background where people want to win. We've lost that in schools today. We haven't got that winner's mentality. There will always be somebody that's got to win. But there are people that like to play the game. So we've got to understand that in some respects, and it's something that I'm considering, is that you haven't always got to have the best grades. It's nice, but you've got to understand what motivates you to go forward. Now, I suppose if we talk about motivation, we look at the top performers in the world, And I suppose most of them didn't have the best education in the world. Most of the athletes didn't have the most money in the world. But what they've done is they've taken something on board. They've wanted to achieve it. They've wanted to be better in themselves. They wanted to do something better, or they wanted to achieve something more. And there are still athletes out there that want to be the best. So what I'm probably asking is that let's understand the notion of what motivation really is and whether it really matters. And obviously with the schools going back, what motivates our teachers to reward our students and our kids in some respects? Do we understand our kids' motivation? What do they want? What do they want to achieve? Why do they want to do it? So those questions I come back to. Asking them, can they do the task? Do they really want to do the task, and why are they doing it? And what must they do to succeed? And will it be beneficial to them? Now, if you can see a benefit, or they can see a benefit, and it's not necessarily reward driven, like those rats in an experiment, we might get a better future. So just have a ponder on that. Motivation. What motivates you? We appreciate something might, but what I'd like you to do is to scratch the surface and understand why it matters to you. Why have you got that motivation? What are you aiming for? And then have a look at your children and go, what is their motivation for doing something? Is it you're overlaying something on them because you think it's going to be good for them? The kids are back to school, which is bottom line, and all I'm trying to think of is what's going to motivate them to have a better year ahead. What do they see? What do they feel? What do they think? And what is their motivation? And what is driving them forward? Now, in the world of NLP, we call it a submodality. It is their driver. It's what they get up with a purpose to do. Now, obviously, as we get older, we understand that. And I often think, reading through this experiment back done in the 1930s, that, you know, you feed a rat a treat, and the more he does the operation, the more he gets the treats. But then he starts to teach others so that they all do it, and it's just a given. So what I'm trying to get back to is that shouldn't we be looking at other ways of understanding motivation and other ways of understanding what we really want, what we desire? Just bear that in mind as the day goes on. Thank you for your time.